Hello, one and all. Welcome to my YouTube show, Creative Spark, where I talk to cool people about the cool things that they do. And with me today is an eldritch being who has seen fit to give themselves some flesh so that we can comprehend them. Cinder Block Sally. Hello.
Hi there. How's it going? What an intro. That was a
Thank you.
great intro. Very
I'm
accurate.
I'm very proud of my intros. I think it's the one good bit, and it's just downhill from there, which is fine.
Yeah, listen. If it starts good and it ends good, the middle is the least important part.
Yeah, exactly. That's what everybody says about content creation.
Yeah.
How are you? Are you well?
I'm doing good. I'm well.
Cool.
No, things are good. Things are good. I'm getting back into streaming. Took a little bit of time off that and just kind of trucking along.
How are you finding getting back into streaming generally?
It's fine. Streaming is like it's like exercise
Hmm.
where I feel like you need to get into the habit of it, figure out what is a comfortable amount to do to maintain your physical and emotional health,
Yep.
and then do that amount. But when you take time off, you get bad at it again.
Yep. I think that's very apt. I think people really underestimate how much of like a psychological toll streaming can take.
It's yeah, it can be a lot. It can be a lot. I mean, it's also just sitting in a chair being on your computer. So
It's
it
not
is
the
a
hard.
lot,
I'm not saying
but
it's
it's
the hardest thing in the world. I'm just saying that it can be quite. It's look.
depending on what you're doing, you can be putting yourself in situations where you might get a little stressed. But
Yes,
all things considered, it's also still just sitting in a chair.
yes, it could be a lot worse. Um, now that we started with that, let's cast our minds back to the beginning when you were just a little eldritch monster.
Yeah, sure.
Um, how did you land on the name Cinder Block Sally?
Um, it's a dumb story, but I will tell it. When I moved to Philly,
Hmm.
I was looking for like a theater thing to get into, some sort of performative thing to do, and I couldn't find one that I liked. So I tried to put on a one man show. But I'm also very acutely aware of how horrible and boring that can be,
Hmm.
and how I'm not like a good actor or a good musician or anything like that. But I did really want to put on a show. So I built a show sort of around what I knew my limitations would be
Hmm.
as somebody that was like making everything. And there was a comedian, I don't remember which comedian, but they were doing a stand-up bit where they had a big like a big whiteboard, not a
Mm.
whiteboard, but like a big sheet of papers, and they would flip the paper and it would have drawings or would say stuff, and it would be kind of like they'd almost banter with it.
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna steal that because that's a crutch I can lean on
Yeah.
for this show." So at one point in the show, I wanted people the gimmick in the show at the moment was my character was like depressingly lonely and they were looking to make friends. So I put up an email address because I wanted people to email me after the show to hang
Right.
out. And the email address I wrote was Cinder Block Sally because I thought it sounded funny. Um, so that's where it comes from. I don't, and I
Oh,
just kind of
nice.
stuck with it. And then I was like, well, I have the email address. So that's covered. So maybe I'll just lean into that. No, but that is where that is where it comes from.
That's an amazing starting place. Um, okay, so how did you get from doing a one-man show to doing D&D videos?
Yeah. Somebody in one of my D&D groups actually. Early on in TikTok, uh somebody in one of my D&D groups was like you should make TikToks of your drawings because I sometimes draw. I don't think
Mm.
I'm particularly good. But she was like there's a lot of people that make TikToks that are doing that kind of thing and you just should. So I was like, all right, I'll get TikTok. I'll learn what that is. And then instead of making those, I made a couple of those sorts of videos, but I noticed there were a lot of people that were doing videos where it was just like them talking with a
Mm.
green screen of whatever they were talking about. I was like, oh, I could do that about D&D. Like there's people doing it about comic books. I can do
Mm.
that about D&D. So I started making video that's really where it started. And it's the first thing that I did was I made a series of videos that were all about how to make something completely new in D&D without changing any of the rules.
Mm.
So like how would you be a cyborg in D&D and really
Yeah.
feel like a cyborg but just from picking all of the officially published material
Mm.
or stuff like that. Um and then it just kind of went from there. Yeah. And then the main reason why I'm on YouTube now more than TikTok is because of money. YouTube just pays better for me at least. So there you go.
I think that's the case for a lot of people in general, unless you're doing like huge numbers on TikTok.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, your style of video has pivoted a lot since then as well.
Yes.
How have you kind of chosen and carved your path out as you've gone?
Well, initially, I was doing, like, my head floating around a screen, and that was 100% a strategic move because I was thinking, "How can I maintain the concentration of someone watching me talk
Mm,
when I don't wanna put a lot of effort in, but I also know how much attention span people have
mm,
for TikToks, and which is very little." So I was like, "Oh, I can make it look different by doing these big dumb cuts in and out of my head." And then I just realized I thought it was funnier if they were like bouncing
yeah.
around all over the place. So I just did that, and that it worked for a while, and I liked it. And now I'm doing completely different stuff. People still, I still get comments saying like they miss the floating head, and I'm a little bit like, I hear you, but also, but now I'm doing ones where it's like different characters talking to each other.
Mm,
Um, and honestly, the main reason for that was I was getting really bored. I was
mm,
just getting so bored. And I have a very hard time doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, which is unfortunate because that is how you grow on any sort of platform these days. But whenever I start doing a thing, I immediately want to start doing another sort of thing. And I think that the floating head was like really fun, and it is still cool. It's good. I'm love being a floating head.
mm,
Maybe I'll be one again someday. But I just wanted to do other things. And when I do these videos where it's like I use like different cuts and
mm,
different outfits and stuff to make it so it's different characters talking to each other, I can add another layer to it. Like I can still talk about what I want to talk. I can
mm,
still like talk about a cool magic item idea or a character problem or whatever. But I can also now have characters that those ideas are being expressed
mm,
through, which allows me to kind of make the video separate from the information in the video, make it like it's feel like its own little story.
mhm.
And and I don't know, that just makes it much more, that just seems like a lot more fun, and it's a lot more satisfying. It
Yeah.
it also takes a lot longer to make. I used to be able to make a video in, like, 20 minutes.
Mm.
Now I have to put a little bit more effort into that. But I think it's worth it. Yeah, it's fun. It makes it feel like I can tell a story.
Is that
Yeah.
your aim with your videos? To like tell a story, or is it to like help people, or is it to inspire people?
If I could boil down the goal into, like, a single idea, it would be, I would like people to have a little bit of a laugh,
Or
and then occasionally at the end, be surprised with feeling a little bit of feelings. Even if whatever that feelings is, but go I like silly and then silly turn of the screw
yeah.
into dramatic or emotional. So that's the goal. Um, but help I would say if the goal was helping people, I think that's an ideal situation, but that also is so cocky. I mean, I'm making YouTube videos. You know what I mean? Like I'm not helping people. I think I'm entertaining people
Mm.
sometimes, and I think maybe I'm giving people advice, but there's a lot of other things that I could be doing or that anyone could do that I think would actually be helping people more. You know what I mean?
I,
Like it's not a selfless job to be a to do what this is. This is gobbledygook. You know what I mean?
Cinder Block Sally is the height of altruism. Uh, no, I
No,
think
no.
I think it probably does because D&D is obviously a good escape for a lot of people, and I think inspiring people to be a bit more creative
Oh,
about it's
for
important.
sure, for sure. I just look, what the po I would say more than anything else, the
Mm.
goal of D&D is to have fun
Hmm.
with your friends. That's the goal. It's as simple as that. And you can extrapolate on that in like a lot of different directions. You could, it's very light and shallow in one direction, but in
Mm.
the other direction, it's like, what are we as creatures if not trying to have fun with friends? Like
Mm.
that kind of boils down to what our goal is as humans
Yeah,
to a certain extent. So that's by definition that would be like healthy community. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Um, so I think there's an element of you are doing good if you are engaging with trying to like help people navigate facilitating something like that. But I also think you should. you can't forget that at the end of the day, it also is just it is while it can be all the depth, it is also all the shallow. You know
Yes.
what I mean? That's sort of what I mean. So like I don't I think that there's ways you can engage with it that are good, and ways you engage with it that are not necessarily, you know, less good
Mm.
or sort of more blechel blechel, uh but I think it runs the whole spectrum. All of it does. I think it's all nothing, but it also all means something a little bit. But that's kind of what makes it special.
Mm.
There's not a lot of things that I think that run that spectrum where you can be making poop jokes
Yep.
and, you know, eating trash food, but at the same time like doing something that is essentially like exercise but for your emotions. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Like that's a lot that's a lot of weird stuff altogether.
It is. I think it's definitely unique to tabletop RPGs as well. That, like you say, that mix of, yeah, shallow and deep.
Do you know where I think it also exists? I also think it exists in intramural sports.
Okay.
I think that if you are a part of a bocce ball league
Mhm.
and you get together once a week and you have your team, and then you're in like a little and there's like a, you know, there's like a crew of different teams. So
Mhm.
it's the same 40 people getting together every week, but you're with your team and you're playing other people and you're like hanging out while you're doing it. I think that that also does that. I think that like ritualistic play, I
Yeah.
think is that. And D&D is just a very intimate and easily accessible version of that. You
Mm.
don't need a lot of things to start play. You know, you basically just need someone to know the rules or someone to know enough of the rules for you guys to make up the rest of the rules and pieces of paper. So you know, and you don't really need you need four people
Yeah.
really.
Sometimes
Yeah.
less.
It's true. Have you ever run a one-on-one D&D session
I
before?
did
Or been a
one
part of one?
literally earlier. I did a session 0 just for one player. Yeah.
I've only done one and it was really fun, but it also was like I don't know if I would want to do this that much. It was a
Yeah.
lot, but it was fun.
No, I fully agree. It was nice as like knowing that I'm doing this in the build up to a campaign with more people, just
Yeah.
as like integrating their character into the world. I'm running a semi regular campaign with 2 players, which is fine because they're both happy to RP off of each other.
Yeah.
So you can kind of just like, you're in the woods, go, and then you go and make dinner for an hour, and they come back and they will still be RPing, and it's fine.
That's great.
I do think it depends on the players you've got though. Like if somebody's
Oh, for
slightly
sure. For
nervous or anything
sure.
like that, then it's obviously a lot trickier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, let's talk about homebrew.
Sure.
That's
I
obviously a big
talk about
part.
homebrew all the time.
I know, right? It's very convenient. Uh, how do you fit your homebrew review streams uh into this whole thing?
I think that I care emotionally about them more than I should.
Mm.
And I think that they are I think that they are probably like on a spiritual level, they matter a lot. And I think that I have to figure out how to navigate that in terms of how much I actually should be spending time with them. I'm because they take so much energy
Mm.
to do. And at the end of the day, they're like a very small piece of the pie of like
Mm.
what I need to do to survive as as a content creator. But I love them. Like, I mean, I started doing homebrew review streams years ago, almost before I was doing anything else.
Mm.
And it wasn't even with the intention of me um of what it is now, where it's I'm reviewing people's homebrew that they
Mm.
send in. Like it really started with basically what I would do was I would go onto Twitch because I just like reading homebrew. I
Mm.
like I before I did any sort of YouTube anything, I thought I wanted to be a homebrew writer. And
Right.
I would do things like I like there was like a 3-month period where I forced myself I demanded of myself I will design a new monster and I will
Mm.
illustrate it and I will write the lore for it every day. And I did that for like 3 months.
Wow.
And it was cool. Um but yeah, I never ended up getting off the ground with that kind of stuff. I just got really in the weeds with it, which is why I have a little bit of knowledge about it now, is because there was a while where I was like militant with myself with how much homebrew I was going to need to write and put it out there and get
Mm.
the feedback. Because I was just because when you just make it and you don't share it with anybody, you
Yeah.
don't really learn that much. But what I would do is I would go on Twitch. And then I would just go to the Unearthed Arcana subreddit, which, if you don't know about, is a really fun forum for homebrew. People share it, people give each other critiques. It's solid. You can learn a lot on it. Um, And I would just pick pieces of homebrew that looked like they didn't get any attention,
Mm.
because inevitably there's pieces that people post that get hundreds of upvotes,
Yeah.
and there's ones that people post that don't get any attention at all. And I would review them live on stream. And at the end of the review, I would put a comment in the video and say, hey, just so you know, I reviewed this on my stream. And then I would write like a nutshell of the feedback that I gave, and then I
Mm.
would timestamp it. Um, and I just did that for a couple months, and it was really fun. And then it turned into people. I had like a little Discord community, and it eventually grew into just people asking me to review their stuff. And there was a while where I was just taking them one at a time. And the system that I ended up, there were enough people asking me to review their homebrew that I needed to think about how I can do this in a way that feels fair.
Yeah.
And there were weird situations where people were like, if I'll don't give me, I'll give you $5
Mm.
if you review a thing. And that always just feels weird. And I didn't want to be in a situation where people that could do that would be like prioritized.
Mm.
I also didn't want to feel like I was like, this is maybe this is a little too full of myself, but I didn't want to feel like I was working for any of these people.
Yeah.
And the idea that like you are paying me to review your, you said $5 donation
Yeah.
to review your thing feels almost like I'm like doing a little
A
dance for you or
contractor.
something.
Yeah. 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 For
Yeah,
sure.
and I was like, I don't want to do that. Like part of why I do all this content creation stuff is because I really hate having a boss. So the system that I decided upon was there's a form, and you submit it to the form, and then I put it on this big wheel, and it's random.
Mm.
So randomness was like the solution, but then that just ended up being what I do, because I think at the end of the day, it's more engaging and often more helpful if the stuff I'm looking at is stuff that the people that are watching are sending in, than
Yeah.
just like
Of
random
course.
people. There was also another element of it, which was that when I'm reviewing random homebrew, those people that are posting it on the Unearthed Arcana, they are like agreeing for it to be public on the
Mm.
internet by posting it, but they weren't agreeing specifically to like this random balding crazy man is gonna yell at you about grammar for
Yeah.
10 minutes. And I don't know, it feels I don't know, I didn't like that. So by having it be like an opt-in
Mm.
thing, it also is essentially like a social contract
Yeah.
where it's like I won't feel bad about giving you a pretty harsh critique
Yeah.
because that's what I do,
Yes.
and you are signing up for that. So it's not like you're not signing up for it.
Yes.
So, it's okay for it's almost like it's okay for a Dark Souls game to be very difficult because you want to play a
Yeah.
Dark Souls game. If you wanted to play Mario and suddenly it was the difficulty of a Dark Souls game
Mm.
immediately, that you might not like that. So I don't know. That's yeah. So a combination of like wanting to review people's stuff because it's just more engaging if it's like their stuff, and then wanting to the social contract element was important to me to make me feel like I could do it, because I yell, I like to yell, like I don't
Mm.
know, I get really emotionally invested in the stuff that I'm reading, and so often when I'm reviewing people's homebrew, it's like a really cool idea, and it's like buried under really atrocious writing,
Mm.
and that like genuinely upsets me. And part of I think the entertainment of my show is that like I care a lot about you as a writer, and I care a lot about your writing, but I really don't care about your writing in its current form.
Yeah.
Um, and if I feel like it's eating itself, I'm gonna yell about it,
Mm.
because it's like you're burying a painting under a pile of mud.
Yeah.
Um, but like that's a lot, and that can be really intense for people. So there's an element of like you have to want to sign up for it. You have to take the steps to like there's a form, there's information on the form that you got to like
Yeah.
acknowledge that you've read. Like there's an element of like I'm really deciding that I'm going to participate in this. Because otherwise I think it wouldn't be fun. Otherwise I think it wouldn't be I wouldn't feel as comfortable being as critical and as harsh as I am.
Mm.
Um, and I think that people would feel like it was like me being mean.
Yeah.
They still sometimes think people still sometimes feel like I'm being mean. I get emails about it sometimes.
But if they've agreed to it, then it's like consensual meanness. Yeah. So
Yeah, well, there's an element of I mean, I say this at the beginning of most of my streams, but if I'm like 4 hours in and somebody hops in, they didn't
yeah.
see that beginning, where I'm really not judging you and I'm really not judging your potential. What I'm judging is the thing that I'm looking at,
Mm.
which might be your baby. You might have put your heart and soul into it. You might have worked on it for months. It might be tied to something really emotionally important in your life that makes it have a weight to it. but it also isn't you
Mm.
literally at all. So like there's this I very actively disconnect the writer from the work when
Yeah.
I'm reviewing something, and I think that when you're not used to that, it can be really harsh.
Yes. No, for sure. I mean, a lot of writers drop out of writing in general, like it just like journalism or anything else, because editor feedback is to the point and blunt, and it takes a while to get used to it. So it makes perfect sense. Uh, if you could just do the homebrew stuff, would you just do the homebrew stuff?
I don't know if I would do it. It depends on how often I had to.
Mm.
Like, I don't stream every day right now because I noticed that I need to take breaks.
Mm.
Like, I think I could stream more if I was doing more casual stuff more,
Mm.
like if I was playing video games or reacting to stuff or just kinda, like, hanging.
Yeah.
Like the other day I had a stream where in my Discord, a group of people pretty regularly get together and write like these very focused compendiums and they make art for it. It's very cool. They like do these little community projects. And whenever they do those, I like to look at them on stream.
Mm.
But I don't do those with the critical review eye. It's really me just look at this cool thing the community made. Let's
Yeah.
get excited about it. And I love those. I could do a 10-hour one of those. But the process of reading someone's work and then trying to review it from like a very uh art review slash like grammar
Mm.
slash like game mechanics review while trying to be reasonably respectful and actually give feedback as opposed to
Mm.
just be like rubbing my temples with frustration. I you can't do that forever.
Yes.
And the quality of my reviews, and I think also my temperament just goes just at a certain point just starts to go down,
Yeah.
and I have to like catch that. Um, so I don't know if I could do them all the time. Like I usually do them 2 or 3 times a week right now, like every Sunday, and then usually something on Monday or Tuesday, and then something on Wednesday or Thursday, usually. And I think that that, at least for now, is like the most I feel comfortable doing with being able to like be excited. I want to be
Yeah.
excited regardless of what the piece is.
Yeah.
I want to go into it being excited to read it, you know? So there's a certain amount of patience that you need to have. You can only read so many like strength-based rogues or
Yeah.
speed monks or sorcerers that use hit points instead of spells that haven't really been balanced. You get like you can only do so many of those at a time before you start to lose your mind, you know?
Yes. For sure.
Also, if you have to give the same feedback like 6 times in a row because
Yeah.
it is random. So I'll have a stream where we'll literally get 6 monk subclasses in a row,
Yeah.
and they all kind of need the same feedback. Like that's hard on on the soul.
Of course. For sure. Has there been a bit of homebrew that's really stuck in your mind as being something that's like you wish was officially adopted or something along those lines?
um th- th- the thing that I'll say is there's a lot of things that I've seen in the homebrew that I've looked at that was implemented either through
Mm.
subclasses or feats to help sort of accomplish certain character types that Wizards of the Coast has like implemented actively
Mm.
in the new player's handbook.
Yeah.
So like for example, the amount of different monk subclasses that I used to see that the whole subclass was built around essentially making monks reasonably good at grappling
Mm.
are now just like in the base monk now. So that was a kind of a cool thing to see, just to see like okay, the community is full of very because that's the other thing is as much as I like to yell and scream and
Mm.
stuff, brilliant writers. Like
Mm.
all these people are like really clever, coming up with good ideas, and it's like a very active, constructive
Mm.
space. But I don't know if there's one thing that sticks out in my head. The magic item, the things that stay in my head the most are like the simple, fun ideas. So,
Mm.
like for example, the other day, I looked at something that was a giant T-Rex was
Mhm.
the monster, and T-Rexes are already pretty big. So the main change they did for the giant T-Rex, or the main change that I was like, this is brilliant,
Mm.
was that to represent the fact that it was so big, instead of it having a this is very in the weeds for D&D stuff, but the way that attacking normally works in D&D is you make an attack roll
Mhm.
and it hits the other thing's armor class.
Yeah.
So that's how a T-Rex normally works. It makes an attack roll. If it hits you, it bites. So the way that this monster worked, though, is it did not make an attack roll. It picked an area on the map that was a 10 by 10 foot cube. So essentially like, 4 spaces of people
Yeah.
basically, and everyone in that area has to make a dexterity saving throw to avoid the bite. Now, a dexterity saving throw is as opposed to an attack roll, it's something that the defender makes.
Yeah.
And usually, dexterity is there to represent you needing to move quickly out of the way. So the mechanics there are that the bite can hit 4 people at a time, basically, and then there's different ways to avoid it now because it's not an attack,
Yeah.
it's a save. But the where the mechanics meet the flavor were that this bite is so big and this mouth is so big that it can't really target you.
Yeah.
You just have to get out of the way. It's like you are a fish trying to avoid a whale.
Yeah. That's really
And I
clever.
thought that was really clever. I thought that was a really, really fun way to have the story that you're trying to tell meet the mechanics in like a really, really nice way.
It's
Yeah.
also the idea that you can't defend against something that size; you can only avoid it, which is
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that's sick. Um, when you play, do you tend to use a lot of homebrew in your own games? Or do you tend to stick to official stuff?
It depends. For magic items and like boons and stuff, yes, I use a lot of homebrew. I have a book. I don't think it's. I don't know where it is. Usually I have it by right here. I have a book of like it's called like the Cryptonomic. It has some weird, funny monster name, but it's essentially like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of like tables of weird things. Um, and it's not for a game system, but it's like random tables of like weird things. So there's a section that's all about like weird mutations or weird superpowers
Mm,
or like weird color things. And I will often use I'll often use that book to like make up little things on the fly. Um, but for I don't really use homebrew subclasses or classes that much. If a player is really interested in one,
mm,
or what'll sometimes happen is I was playing it like a player will have a vision for a character
mm.
that we can't fit into a subclass nicely. Like there was a player that wanted to be a barbarian, but he wanted to be like a barbarian that had like a big blunderbuss, and he wanted his
Right.
rage to like work with that. So to do that, we basically looked around online to see if we could find any cool homebrew subclasses that did something like that. We found a couple, and then we picked one. And yeah, so we'll do homebrew sometimes. I make up a lot of homebrew magic items. Homebrew magic items is probably the thing I do the most, and monsters.
Mm.
But monster homebrew, I don't. As much as I give people so much about getting their monsters formatted and making sure they're understanding how everything connects in terms of like the math and
Mm.
stuff, I I often will completely make up a monster and like maybe write down a couple things just to make sure I keep track of it
Yeah.
enough that my players won't realize that I'm making it up.
Yep.
But that happens a lot. That happens a lot.
Yeah. Fully do the same homebrew stuff on the fly where I'm like, oh, it has this thing now.
I usually only make up homebrew like very thoughtfully, preemptively
Mm,
for a game if it's like a very specific idea that
mm.
I have for a character,
Yeah.
or it's tied to something that one of the players mentioned to me. Like a lot of the time, like most of my homebrew magic items for a specific campaign will come from notes that I have from like session 0
Mm,
with a player. Because one of the things that I like to talk to my players about if I have, if I for home games really, because I don't really do streamed games that
mm,
much, to be honest. But so this is all just like with friends. But I'll be like, what would if this was like a movie, like if it wasn't D&D and it was like the end of the movie and it
mm.
was like the final fight scene, like what would your character be like? What would they look like? And they'll usually describe at least one or two things that really aren't baked into the class that they
Yeah.
want to play, or even if we're like really early in the game and it's like potential is open, they could multi-class. There's sometimes they just have an idea that's like a little odd, so that idea will almost always become a magic item or a boon because it's like, okay, cool. Even
Yeah.
they're gonna, because the other thing is that they're gonna forget that they said that also. And then that's really cool because then it's one of those like you're being a little bit of a mentalist where
Yeah.
they feel like you read their mind, but really they forgot that they offhand mentioned that they thought it would be really cool if the shadow sorcerer could turn into a hound of ill omen
Yeah.
as opposed to just summon one. But really, you just remember that. But yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, that's most of my, because I think you got to think about homebrew in like you sort of have to think about it in two separate ways if you want to make homebrew. One is, am I making homebrew for myself?
Hmm.
And then the other is, am I making homebrew for the public? And if you're making it for yourself, then literally nothing matters other than what you need it to
Yeah.
be. That's it. There are no rules other than, like, you know what you're capable of keeping track of. It might be an incredibly complicated, overpowered, ratchet little creation,
Hmm.
but if you can manage it at your table, then it's fine.
Yeah.
Um, and then homebrew for the public, I think, is more like, how can I make this so that it is going to be the most easily implemented by
Mm.
someone else in the way that I intend for it to be implemented?
Yeah.
Which is a little bit of a different headspace. You're sort of more in like, I mean, you're sort of more almost in like a, not just in like a instruction manual headspace, but also like a marketing headspace.
Yeah. That makes sense. That
Yeah.
makes sense. A lot of the homebrew I do in my own games tends to be like reflavoring stuff. So I had a player who wanted to be an alligator. He basically wanted to play as
Great.
an alligator, and he wanted to
Great.
do the death roll thing.
Yeah.
And the solution I came up with was to give him a magic item which gave him Booming Blade, and that it would activate even if he was dragging them. So he could grab them, Booming Blade as a cantrip, drag them away. They would take damage. There you go. Death
That's
roll.
fun. That's fun.
It was super fun. And then he changed his character before the campaign started.
Uh, ain't, ain't it the way?
I'll throw it
Ain't it
back.
the
I'll
way?
throw it back at him at some point. They're gonna fight an
You know,
alligator with that
yeah, I was
mechanic.
I was gonna say, yeah. Now you just use that against them. Now
Yeah,
you have an NPC.
100%. Um, do you get a chance to play very often? Do you prefer DMing or playing?
Um, I do not play outside of projects very often, and outside of projects, like just for fun with friends,
Mm,
I'm almost exclusively the dungeon master. Like, in my life outside of as a YouTuber, like
yeah,
all of my friends and community that I like, been friends with for a while, or just people in the neighborhood, none of them live in this space. Most of them, have normal,
yeah.
reasonable human jobs and lives and stuff. So, like, I was the spearhead of like, hey, let's
Mm,
try this. When I first moved here and like none of my friends played D&D, I hosted a big party, and the party was, we basically drank and ate pizza, and I put on a slideshow describing all of the different classes in D&D, but like very much from the perspective of people that like have no idea what D&D is. Would they would hear the word paladin and it
mm,
might as well be barble, like
yeah,
really no under, because if you have no understanding of D&D, if you're really not in fantasy world, there's it's really a lot.
yeah,
It's a lot. And I think a lot of people take for granted that you hear the word cleric and you think like holy warrior, or
yeah,
you hear the word warlock and that's the evil
yeah.
magic, but sorcerer is the innate magic. Like, that's, nobody thinks like that
No,
in the real world. So we had a big party and I basically did a slideshow about all the different classes. Oh, and the different races at the time. So like it was just player's handbook stuff. Um and then at the end, we all made characters together.
oh
Everybody,
cool.
oh, I guess sort of throughout it, they made characters. So everybody, at the end of the party, everybody had a level 1 character with a full character sheet filled out. Um, and then I basically was like, cool. So I'm going to start running at least one D&D game with these. This is kind of the vibe, like what we've been talking about
Mm,
for this last. And they knew this going in. This wasn't like a
yeah,
twist at the end of the party. Um,
yeah.
but I was like, if
Surprise.
if this was fun and you were like, let's do this again, um, like let me know, and that can be your character. And there were like 14 or 15 people there, and I think 7 ended up saying they wanted to play. So my first
Mm,
D&D group that I ever ran for was 7 people. But yeah, that's a really long way to say that in my current life right now, I have one D&D group that I run a game for in my private life, and we play once a month ish. People have kids and stuff, so we don't get to play that much, and it's very fast paced. Um, we are not deep emotional role players. It is more of like a 80s action movie.
mm,
Things are moving. We level up after every session.
nice.
It is a power
Yeah,
fantasy version of D&D, very much.
very cool.
Because that's what we have time for. We don't have time for sitting and letting 2 characters have a monologue about how they miss their dad for 2 hours. People got to wake up for work in the morning.
People do have to wait for
I,
more. Yeah,
sometimes
100%.
those would be fun, but yeah, in my private life, we like to do the fun and the silly and the fast pace, and very like heavy duty, hard hitting combat at like big hectic cinematic
Yeah,
moments.
that's very cool. Uh, do you have any plans to start like an actual play show or play more on stream or anything like that?
I'm in a podcast now that I've been on for a while, and we just finished recording our first thing, and we're moving on to the next one soon called Unbalanced Encounters.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's like my main actual play thing that I do. I play a big robot named Guard. Uh, I like it. It's fun. It's a good show. Um, go check it out. But in
Thanks.
terms of on my own, I don't know. Here's the thing. I have so much love and admiration for everybody that wants to do actual plays. Everyone that's putting on actual plays. Like it is a lot of work. Whether you're a player or a dungeon master, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to show up to a stream, to a show, and to play D&D in this weird version where everything is performative,
Yep.
and it really does become work. And so I don't this is not to diminish any of that, but I think it's really hard to successfully put on an actual play. And for me, what success is going to be different than other people. But
Mm.
this is what I do for a living now, and I'm not super wealthy or anything. Like I make as much money slash a little bit less than what I made when I was like teaching as a preschool teacher. So like I'm surviving, but it's a lot of work
Mm.
for very little payoff, usually, to put on an actual play, whether that's payoff financially or payoff as like growth.
Yeah.
Because think about it like this, like, especially for like a live streamed one, which ironically is like the main ways to have people watch them, but the likelihood that you are going to grow new audience
Mm.
members if you are even on session 3 of a campaign,
Yeah.
an hour and a half in, somebody that's hopping into your session, they're just not going to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Like it's so hard to gain new audience members uh after you start. Like it's like you really, and I mean this is true of everything. This is true of Critical Role. Like
Mm-hmm.
their first episode each season compared to any of the other ones is night and day. So I think that if I was going to do an actual play, I would need to, and I have a couple ideas for this that I've been kicking around in my head, but they're all really a lot of work to make work. But I would need to do an actual play in such a way that I was addressing that issue. And I
Mm.
don't know, I'm not sure exactly what that would be, but I would need it would there would need to be there would need it would need to, like, I like making art or stories or whatever within limitations because I think
Mm-hmm.
it helps make it better. And the limitations, like the golden rule of my actual play would need to be, you know, somebody hopping in session 5
Mm.
is going to be able to enjoy, participate, be
Yeah.
involved, know what's going on as much as somebody in session 1. At least in order for them to like have fun and feel like they want to
Yeah. Of
keep going
course.
on the train. And that's hard. That's hard to do. That's hard to do.
If not, if not completely impossible. Yeah.
I
Hundred
don't think
percent.
it's impossible. I have at least one and a half ideas. Um, uh, but I don't, they're so amorphous still. But
Mm.
like, I think the way that you would make that happen is, in a nutshell, to figure out how to make D&D more of a audience participation game show,
Yeah.
which I think that some shows do a little bit. But I think the tricky thing is, how do you do that in a way that doesn't feel shallow and
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it's in opposition to the game? Because a
Yeah.
lot of the time it's like, okay, cool, you get a magical boon or you have disadvantage on this roll now. But it's like, okay, like it's less like it's very unnatural feeling
Yeah.
most of the time. How would you make that, like, integrate those into the same thing and do that in a way that doesn't feel super shallow, ham-fisted, or like just like the gimmick? Like I would need that to you want that to, I think, be built into the foundation of the show. And then also still make it be what it needs to be good D&D,
Yes.
which is like it still needs to be a good story. It still
Yes.
needs to have fun character beats. It still needs to, you know, be this thing that sort of feels like it naturally tied together.
Mm.
Like there's so many things that an actual play would need to be also.
Yes. Which is why most actual
um,
plays have several writers on them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well,
Well,
the
no, well,
big
maybe
ones.
the big ones.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was gonna
yeah.
say probably not
When I
most.
think about actual plays, I almost take like Dimension 20 and Critical Role
Mm.
sort of like out of the equation.
Mm.
Like I do think that there's a certain element of celebrity slash notoriety that excludes that makes it so most of the rules in terms of like what are you trying to do to build an
Yeah.
audience like don't apply
Yeah.
anymore, you
That
know?
makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
Like if you have an audience, and this is I think most actual plays of between 10 and 50 people, which is
Mm.
most. And I would say more on the low end than the high end.
Mhm.
I don't know if Critical Role is going to be the best show to take advice from in terms of how to grow your audience. I don't know. That's just me. They're playing a different game. They don't have to follow the same rules.
It's very true. It's very, very true. It's also not a good. It's a good way to learn how to play D&D, but it's not a good way how to learn what D&D is. I feel like at least the big shows, because when you're playing in your home game, you're going to spend a couple of hours sometimes trying to find the right slippers for somebody who's lost the slippers or something.
All right, I'm going to push you here. I don't like being confrontational when I'm a guest, but I'm going to push you here
Please
a
do.
little bit. I would argue that season 1 of Critical Role,
Mhm.
when at the very beginning, when they are just starting, when their sound's not that good,
Yep.
and they're on Geek and Sundry, and they're basically hanging out, and they're eating, and it's really almost unwatchable from like a art
Yeah.
perspective. I think that's actually maybe some of the best things to watch to see what D&D is
Yeah.
like, because those like and it evolves, right? It obviously grew into more of something that where they
Yeah.
started taking more seriously and stuff. But those early like out like everything through like the even through and I mean through interesting arcs through like the vampire shenanigans and whatever. Like I would say maybe even half of that season of Critical Role, the
Mhm.
first one, it's I don't know. I feel like it's pretty close to D&D. Like,
Mm.
yes, they're more attentive and they're much better performers and they like all of that, but they are rude. They are talking over each other. They are eating at the table. They are forgetting what the dungeon master said or mishearing the dungeon
Yep.
master or arguing about rules. Like they I don't know. I feel like that early stuff is actually pretty good for it. I although I agree that any of the later stuff isn't, and I don't think anything on Dimension 20 is. Especially Dimension 20, I also think is an easier watch, but
Mm.
it also is an easier watch for the same reason that I think it's not the best representation, which is that it's edited. It's
Yeah.
edited. It's
No, I fully agree. When I was talking about it not being great, I mean the current stuff where it's like
oh yeah.
cinema level quality and everything else. Because your D&D home games are going to have the DM going, roll dexterity, and then someone rolls and goes, "What's 5 + 3?" And you're like,
Yeah.
"Come on, man." So yeah, I agree with your pushback fully.
To be fair, most people when they are the one rolling the dice,
Mm.
they forget how to do math in that moment.
Yes. Oh no,
I
no,
think that
I was not in any way like
like I
taking a
knew
dig
it
at
was
anyone.
8, but if I was rolling that, I would have been asking that question too.
Even like,
I don't
is
know
that
what
a
it is. It's
3?
a
Are we sure
strange
this is a
phenomenon.
3? No, 100%. That is the end of all of my questions. So, did you have anything that you wanted to plug in particular apart from your channel, which I will obviously link to?
Anything I want to plug? Yeah, I'll plug my show, Unbalanced Encounters. We pitch it as it's like if Studio Ghibli and Gravity Falls had a D&D podcast baby. It's about a group of people in a small wood cutting village. Two of them are from the community and two of them are outsiders, and basically they are doing deforestation. The empire is putting pressure on them to do so, and the forest is sort of magically now responding. And two of the people are woodcutters from the village, two of them are people that are sent from the military to
Mm.
make sure that they keep doing the wood cutting. And I play a big robot from the army made to make sure people stay in line. And it evolves and becomes other things, but it's a good show. Yeah. Other than that, yeah, I'm on YouTube, Cinder Block Sally. I stream on Twitch every Sunday night, reviewing people's homebrew. You can just send it in, goes on the wheel. Be ready for it to be a harsh critique, but one from a place of love and respect and wanting you to grow as a writer. And then I stream other days too, and that's about it. I don't know what else.
Okay, wonderful. Now we do the sign off, which was decided on my first episode with Pointy Hat, where we just stare at the camera and wave awkwardly.
All right.
Yeah, so
Awkwardly?
it doesn't have to be awkward.
No, it can be awkward.
It's up to you. You can be as awkward as you want.
Oh, we're going awkward.
Okay, bye.